hopefully we get some people that are willing to bid on long-term holding facilities. I see the news like you guys do. I see the drought across the Midwest. I scratch my head. I said, where are we going to put those horses? Who's got healthy lands in the Midwest where, where you got more forage out there for horses? We're talking to folks. We're letting folks. Congressional folks are aware of the situation. I think it's going to take some help outside of BLM to be able to kind of move us to where we need to get to as far as the horses. We're also looking at some longer term treatment of mares. The current treatment, PCP, is effective for about 2 years if you do it at the right time, and the right time is kind of that December, January, February window. If you do it afterwards, you might only get a year effectiveness of that treatment. So one, we're trying to be smart about when we do that. We're also going to be working on a longer term treatment that may last up to 5 years. Those will be good. That'll help us. But again, they're more longer term out there as far as helping us. It's the short term thing that I'm concerned about right now. And I hear your concern.
Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, one thing that I see here, I'd like to see the pictures that we have in front of us. These are the pictures that I want to see on TV, not the pictures of these majestic herds of beautiful horses running the plains. I want to see the truth. We don't see the truth. And I think that's part of the issue that we deal with on a daily basis of the people that support the wild horses. They don't understand. You ask about reporting what you see in the field. This is what I see in the field. I don't see the beautiful herds of wild horses that don't have meat on their ribs running around. I think that's part of the problem is we portray it as this beautiful thing. And, it used to be a beautiful thing. It's not anymore. 30 years ago when I was a kid, it was a treat to see a wild horse. Now it's just, there's another one, dying, starving, thirsty. Yet we continue to just perpetuate and put a Band-Aid on it for this week when we get a gash the next week. I don't know that there's a solution for it because every time we come up with a way to do something about it, all we do is end up in court over it. And I understand the position you're in, but at the same time, I think pictures like this are what need to be brought forth. I don't see this. I come to Las Vegas and I turn on the news. I don't see these pictures. I don't hear the truth on the news. I hear what someone's perception of what a wild horse is. And I've been to these meetings and I hear this ecotourism deal. Where are you going to take them to show them this? There's nowhere that I've been in Nevada that you see the pictures on TV. It looks like this. And I don't know what the solution is, but I think if we could portray a little more of the actual truth instead of the rosy, colorful pictures that we're seeing. And I don't know how to change that. I don't think you're in charge of that, but that's what I'm seeing.
Well, and I appreciate that. We work very hard to give people the news, the information they need to know about how we manage the horses. And we do submit pictures to like this. Social media, if you go on our websites, you can see information. All levels of the organization, we try to get the information out there. And again, we support wild horse and burro management on public lands, but we say it that they have to be managed, and then we have to look at all the tools to manage it. It's amazing to me that as many efforts, and I know folks from state fish and game agencies to wildlife conservation organizations have been very active, particularly at Washington, to show the other side of the picture. And yet it still seems like we have an uphill battle on that front. And I keep saying we need a Sheryl Crow, Viggo Mortensen type of person on the other side, because that's where it seems like they get a lot of the publicity. And again, BLM supports proper wild horse and burro management on the public lands, and we're trying to get there. And I think we just need to continue sending that message, is that that's where we want to get, because everything benefits. You have healthy wild horse herds, you have the healthy rangelands, healthy sage-grouse habitat, livestock permittees are out there on the range. That's where we need to get to.
Anybody else? My only comment is, sitting on the Governor's Sage Grouse Committee, wild horses rose right to the top. And with what you're saying coming up in the future, that really concerns me, because our riparian areas are just getting beat. And that's a critical part of our sage grouse habitat. So we're looking at the Bureau of Land Management helping us protect Nevada, our industry, our sage grouse, our state in general, and we're being told we can't get there. And that's overly concerning to me. I know you have a genuine approach from you personally, but it concerns me where we're going as the Bureau of Land Management not being able to help us on such a critical issue. Anybody else?
Just real briefly, for the record, the other commissioners' concerns, they eloquently stated exactly the case. Mr. Wallace very eloquently stated, you guys, you're not going to find an argument on this commission. The commissioners were here before, the commissioner here before that, or at least that I've ever stated. That's the position, and unless somebody knows a different one that I've missed, that's the position. It's just of every one of the last 20 some odd that have been here. Same deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
So drought. Just so you know, you may know this, but 100% of Nevada's are in some form of droughts. And as you can see, as of this week or last week, 65% of Nevada was in severe or extreme drought. And we had done this report for the Public Lands Commission meeting about 3 weeks ago in Winnemucca. And since that time, the percentage of Nevada in severe drought has increased from 19 to 27%. So that's just kind of, I think we all know we're in a drought, but it's just interesting to kind of see how it's not getting better. This map kind of shows the predictions for the fall. And if you look at Nevada, we are basically smack dab in having an extended drought period through November. So thinking about if we're going to get any relief and how that it's going to affect livestock grazing, horse use on public lands, sage grouse habitats, it doesn't look very pretty from that standpoint of being able to get some fall rains in order to germinate some of the seed that's been dropped, if it's been dropped in some of the areas, in order to carry over some healthy plants into the winter, spring, and summer season next year, or whenever we start getting some moisture. So that's one of our big concerns. It's one of the areas that we are currently working on as far as identifying whether it's fire rehabilitation or if we're removing cattle off of allotments because there's no forage out there. We're trying to identify the standards by which we need to meet in order to return animals out on public lands. And so that's what we're going to be working on this fall, and so that we can communicate that to our livestock permittees so they know that. It's just not going to be very pretty if there's nothing that grows over the winter time to be able to turn cattle out. We're going to be looking at cheatgrass, and cheatgrass growth, across the state varies, but I can tell you in my backyard where I live in Reno, I didn't see any green up on the hillsides this year. And when I hiked around back there, it was just old residual stuff that was on the ground. What was left was very short, and I have a lot of Medusa head where we live too, so even that wasn't, the green up was very small this year. It's very hard to predict these annual grasslands from year to year, the kind of forage that could be produced by these annual grasslands. It varies so much on the timing of the moisture that we get during the spring, the soil temperatures. It's one of the tools we're looking at as far as allowing permittees to utilize that forage, but it's hard to say how much, when, and to mobilize. It's a huge challenge to do that, and at the same time pull them off after they use the annual grasslands so that the perennials that may be there can start to grow during the latter part of the spring in order to return our rangelands to healthy condition. But that is one of the areas that we are looking at, trying to figure out how to, again, utilize what we call tactical strategic grazing to minimize flashy fuels, to prevent fires from next year, and at the same time improve our rangeland health. So again, what are we doing? We're spending a lot of resources in our offices monitoring the rangeland, documenting drought, taking photos, doing transects. We're working with our permittees in the areas that are really impacted. A lot of the permittees are taking voluntary non-use, meaning they're pulling their cattle off early. Some of them haven't turned out. And again, we're engaging them about next year. No decisions have been made about next year, but you know, you look at that last map I showed, it's not looking real pretty that things are going to turn around quickly. And we're also talking about our emergency wild horse and burrow gatherers in areas where we got too many horses and again, no forage. We are going in and gathering horses, and that will of course affect that fiscal year 13 gather schedule I talked about earlier, but it's one of the things that we have to do. So again with droughts, you know, some of the problems that we have to worry about is increased fire risks. Again, depending if we get flashy fuels, you know, that's and can be site specific. You know, depending on what areas might get moisture. We got more competition for the forage, whether it's horses, cattle, wildlife. A lot of times in drought situations, the plants are in survival mode. So where they put their energy is in trying to stay alive, and seed production typically drops off significantly during extreme drought periods by plants, which then affects subsequent years' restoration naturally. And again, like I mentioned earlier, any information given to our local BLM offices about what you're seeing out there, photos, will go a long way and helpful as far as being strategic on where we need to go. So, any other questions?
Commissioner Drew?
Just a couple of items, and again, Raul, thanks for being here today. One of the things I wanted to point out is just an appreciation for Nevada BLM in terms of their aggressive initial attack, primarily in the sage-grouse habitat. And I know you guys have had some close calls with some of your suppression crews, and we lost an air tanker in Lincoln County, and I think that speaks to the level of not only commitment of your people, but also the danger that's inherently involved in firefighting. The couple, and I also appreciate your remarks about the rehab and your efforts and the effort to not only use native but also adapted species to help kind of hold the world together here. One of the concerns I had, and I don't think it's a Nevada specific issue, but it has become a Nevada issue, was with the Lost and the Rush fires. And those are two fires, as you know, that started in California and then kind of blew up and burned in Nevada. And I'm not sure that the level of initial attack on the California side was up to par with the Nevada side, and that was a major concern for me on those two fires because, as you know, both of them burnt a lot of very critical sage-grouse and mule deer habitat. So I don't know if you had any thoughts or have worked with California maybe to try and improve some of their management on their side of the line before it burns into Nevada.
Actually, we did talk to California about, you know, what was going on. Some of this, it's all comes down to resources and priorities. California has a small sage-grouse population, really in the theme of things. I believe it was I can't remember, I think it was the Lost fire, maybe it was the Rush, one of those two. It was more of a Forest Service initial attack fire. And I'm not criticizing the Forest Service, but their priorities were slightly different, you know. So I think we need to kind of work on the fact, particularly in states where you have only a little bit of sage-grouse, the importance of even that little bit of sage-grouse habitat that's there. And so that's probably an area we need to kind of work on and continue to communicate that. You know, having said that, some of the early reports that I had gotten about the fires on that side that were really big actually turned out to be half that size. I think, again, when you have a lot of that smoke up there, it's a lot bigger, and then once it dies down, you actually see what the size is. So they did get a lot of resources on it, you know, pretty quick after some concerns were raised, and so we appreciated that. But I mean, to me, this is part of the continuing effort that we're all involved in as far as, you know, it's priorities. It's priorities and resources you have, and where do you go?
And just to tie in, I guess my second point or comment and question was that we look at the Holloway fire, and it burnt, you know, a large portion of the Bill Creeks and the Trouts, and then burned into the Montanas into some pretty critical habitat. And I know the Winnemucca Field Office had a Montana Mountain Fire kind of a pre-suppression plan and fuels plan that had been in the works and kind of in the planning for 2 or 3 years maybe, and had not been implemented when that fire hit.
Right.
I can't help but to believe that if that had been implemented, it may have helped with some of the efforts, although I understood that fire was pretty severe. So I guess my question is there anything that this commission can do to help BLM prioritize some of those issues and maybe speed up some of the planning process so we can put those things on the ground before they burn up?
So one of the things in the governor's Sage Grouse strategy recommendations and what BLM has been talking about is the need to, again, be very strategic on where we're going to protect and manage our sage grouse habitats. You know, we're working with the local area working groups to identify these priority areas for sage grouse habitat. Fish and Wildlife Service has basically said that all of our priority areas that we've identified in Nevada are hugely important to the bird. So anything that's lost is really bad because it puts the remaining pressure on what hasn't been lost. So, I mean, the way the commission can be, I think, helpful is that to kind of reemphasize the need that all priority sage grouse habitat, whatever it turns out to be in the state, is very critical to keeping the bird off of the list, and that additional resources need to be found to protect those areas. I know that was one of the recommendations that came out of the Nevada's sage grouse strategy was resources were hugely important in order for this plans to be successful. So I think people need to hear that, you know, they need to understand, and, you know, talking about the impacts of drought and fire, all of that affect these priority areas. We really can't afford to lose too many, and we need to make sure what we do lose comes back in a healthy condition. So the protection of the resources applied to on the ground also is just as important as getting them on the ground.
So let me just ask a follow-up question based on that. What people need to hear from us? Is that BLM national office? Is it the state office? I mean, obviously you're at the state office and you're here today, so I appreciate that. But I mean, who do we need to send that message to? Department of Interior, congressional delegation? What would be your recommendations?
All of the above, including the governor's office.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you for coming today, Raul, and I want to thank you and Amy for all your time you spent at the Governor's Sage Grouse Committee. You've more than made yourselves available and been fairly helpful throughout all the processes we have. And you stand here today, you don't avoid questions, you come here and take it head on knowing what you're walking into, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You almost know what it feels like to be a wildlife commissioner.
Thanks.